So Jeppe, I'm really happy that you took your time. We had some conversation the last few weeks, and clearly you've been busy. You were in, where was it? India last week?
Chennai last week,
Yeah.
and Lisbon this week. So came back last night.
So it was perfect timing today.
Perfect timing.
Jeppe, what is the most underrated decision that you have taken in the past that ended up being like very significant? But maybe at the time that you took it, you didn't think about it much.
I think for me, but also for quite a few of you, it is not settling. And what I mean by that, I think many of us, we've been in jobs and being used to that lifestyle with a high wage and company car and these sort of things. Pleo card, potentially, not me, because that came after. But I think having the courage not to settle with that and really jump in and take the sacrifice, no matter if that's harder work or no pay or less pay. I think that not settling, and I've taken that jump a couple of times, but I think it's underrated not because of you, because you've done it, but because of all of those that haven't done it, but that are thinking about it, but never really got to do it.
So it's one of those decisions you take, and maybe at the time it didn't seem such a significant thing, natural, but it ended up really...
I think it was significant. I mean, I spent the first 8 years of my career on a normal track, consulting, corporate, and I had a great career, but there was something missing. And I was honestly, I had to think a lot about it, and I just decided not to settle. And I didn't have the full courage in the beginning. I wanted to start my own business, but I actually started by joining a technology company that was a year or two old, which gave me a little bit of income. And then the next step I took was just to completely jump in.
Excellent, Jeppe. So that's a good opening. And I would like to welcome to the camera. So welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. It's the GSA podcast where we meet our alumni, finalists and winners. We call them the GSA Stars. Today we're going to go deep dive into fintech and into hypergrowth and into a personal journey that I'm sure it has been for Jeppe. Jeppe is the CEO and co-founder of Pleo, and is still acting CEO of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeppe, I told you that we have this concept. So today we recorded 2 podcasts already. And our ambition is to use the same concept for everyone, no matter what their background is and so forth. So we have kind of a framework that we can reuse. And today we started with the Danish alumni, but we will already start setting up online podcasts with a very nice production side from our end, and maybe a little more forgiving for the other side, so we can do interviews with people from different parts of all corners of the globe of our alumni. So the 3 chapters that we have to go through is 2 that is very much designed around your personal journey with Pleo and professionally, and then the last chapter is what we call Down the Rabbit Hole, where we try to ask you some more open-ended questions where you could maybe reveal something that most commonly you're not revealing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very inspiring
exciting.
Yeah, for founders that are maybe not where you are now, because as we all know, if you are a founder, you have to face some challenges. And it's nice to be reminded when you see from the outside, Jeppe, you are a very successful founder. You are a unicorn founder. So to get that kind of understanding that it's also been challenging through the journey for Jeppe, I think that could be very interesting to hear his take on that. But let's dig into the first chapter, which is about the defining moment of Pleo's growth. There's a quote from Reid Hoffman: if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you haven't started fast enough. How does that resonate with your own journey with Pleo?
I think it resonates, although I think it's sometimes misunderstood a little bit as well. So what I mean by that is we were certainly not sort of proud of the first product launched in Pleo, and actually quite surprised that it became such a success already in the first version. And I think it's really not because I'm trying to be humble. It was really bad, but the alternatives were just much worse. So it still actually solved the problem. But to be clear, we didn't even have a mobile app when we launched the products. That's as sort of premature it was. But when I say that, I think there are two sides to that coin. One is, yes, you need to get something out, predominantly because you got to have a conversation with a customer around something real. You got to be able to observe through behavior, see what's missing and what's working. So that is a clear check. I think when it's sometimes misunderstood is that people think it can be a full validation of whether your area can become a success. And I think there are so many, I would say, false negatives of that, where you come out with an MVP and you don't really see adoption or excitement. And that's I would say probably how it is 9 out of 10 times. It doesn't mean that it cannot be done. I think sometimes, too many products, even features within Pleo, it takes a long time to get to a real fit. So I would say don't interpret too much from the MVP. Take it as a learning platform, but sometimes it takes months and years to really get to that place where you have something in the market that can take off. And that's why, yes, I think you should do it, but don't overinterpret.
Do you remember how you felt when you built that MVP? And did you build it as an MVP? Was it like when you brought it to the market, you were extremely proud and you really thought this is an excellent first version, and then you got hit by the feedback, or how was it for you?
So because we built a product that basically dealt with the money and customers' cash and money movements, we were a little bit conservative in how to first scale it. So we kind of said, okay, let's get on board around 40 to 50 customers, and then we'll shut the doors for a period of time because we need to ensure that everything is working. And if something fucks up, at least, we can manage 50 customers. We wouldn't be able to manage 500. So I think the first validation we saw was there was an incredible demand for what we were doing. And we saw that through a number of different things. So first we put out a landing page with basic concepts. We did a bit of PR that gave a lot of response.
Before we had so that's the classical.
Yeah, that's the classical approach. But it gave us comfort that, okay, we're onto something. Then we went on, these were the early days of Take Barbecue. So it wasn't at the scale as it is today. It was in the Opera. Were any of you at Take Barbecue in the Opera?
I was there. I
10 years ago.
Clearly remember that.
So much smaller than today. And we had just alpha launched the product, and I think we had like 2 customers. One of them was our own company. But we said, okay, let's try to use this event to catch some interest. And I had a speaking slot on stage, and I said, hey, come to our booth. You'll get live onboarding onto Pleo, and we will even put a little bit of cash on your account so you can use it immediately in the bar. And then as things started to settle and I came out of the stage, there were like 70 people that had lined up in front of our little booth, and we were 7-9 people at the time. The whole company was there, and we were just so overwhelmed by the response, and we couldn't even onboard them. So they had to manually entry stuff in the back end of the code base behind the scenes to bring people on board. And we managed to bring everyone on board, and then the day after we had to call some of them and say, hey, we can't move on with you at this point in time because we have to cap it at 40 companies. Some of them are still customers. They joined on that day. So we got some early signals that the product may not be perfect, but people really hate this space and they're willing to really explore new approaches.
These customers from that event, do they have like a special deal now, or
they have a special place in my heart?
That's good. How many rounds did you raise so far?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Every time you raise a round, I guess it's a little bit like climbing a mountain, right? It's a big thing, or can you?
It's completely opposite of what I thought. So I think the mountain to climb was biggest in the beginning, to be honest. Also, quite counterintuitively, the amount of work the funds did was also much more in the beginning than it was in the end. And bear in mind, we haven't fundraised for 3.5 years, and when we fundraised last time, it was pretty crazy market environments, but it sort of became easier and easier, although the amounts became much higher.
You said it surprised you what was actually the work you had to do, or can you tell what was the challenges that you faced in these first rounds?
The very first round wasn't that difficult because we were willing to give away a lot of the company, and we were basically just selling us as a team. We didn't have a product. But the second and third round was actually quite difficult, particularly the third round. That was our Series A. And we raised, I believe, 12 million, maybe 14. And it became a successful round. But I mean, the amount of work we did to make that happen was pretty remarkable. So this was the point in time where fintech started to take off, and there were a lot of landing pages out there that included a card and an app. And Revolut had just launched, Monzo had just launched, and Starling Bank, and so on. And I think investors were fundamentally in doubt. What are the differences between these? And they didn't really see us different to some of the consumer products out there. So we had to do the hard work, and we were just flipping every single stone. Like, we had maybe 80 investor meetings, and this was the time where investor meeting was in person. So you had to go and see every single one of them 2, 3, 4 times. And most of them said no, to be honest. Most of them said no. And we realized that, fundraising is a numbers game, in the sense that, we could be so excited about a meeting with a fund, and we're like, they are so excited about us. And then, it was a no. And then there were others where they didn't really seem excited, and then still we progressed. So it was just a numbers game. We just had to do the hard work. And then by coincidence, the fund we ended up going with, we almost skipped that meeting. So we had 8 meetings lined up on that day in London, and we had said no to this particular fund, Kinnevik, because we just couldn't fit them in. And then my COO, who was with me, we ended a meeting early, like 5 minutes early, and he was like, "Shall we try just to squeeze in this meeting? We only have like 30 minutes, but if we really, really fast track to the office, we could maybe get 25 minutes for them." I was like, "Okay, let's do it." And then we went there, and that first meeting wasn't really super exciting, but it was the door opener to the next meeting, and then that was the fund we ended up going with. So complete coincidence.
Did you do anything different in that meeting because
no,
we stayed and you didn't take it so serious? And
no, it just tells it's a numbers game. Particularly when you're not the hottest kid on the block, you just have to keep going. And we, of those 70, 80 funds we were in touch with, I think 4 of them ended up giving us a term sheet, which was good enough to have some momentum, but I mean, we thought we would get 50.
But you managed to raise the money, and you have been through a hyper growth, you can call it. Are you and your co-founder from back then, are you super organized in the way that you manage the company? So I'm thinking that must have been some stages, like practically, when you had to somehow implement some processes, or was it like that from the beginning? What was your experience there?
I mean, there are so many chapters. We just turned 10 years. So that was a little bit of a moment to look back and say, okay, what's been going on the last 10 years? But I think there are so many chapters, and each of them feels almost like different companies. The first chapter is very much like, you're almost in the same room, or it feels like you're in the same room. Everyone is equal, and you're just so razor focused on getting shit done. And then there becomes a time where stuff becomes a little chaotic, and you gotta think about some team leads or middle management. Sounds awful, but like you need to implement that next layer. But you also feel like we're way too small to have that next layer. So that's a really difficult stage. I think between 40 and 80 is a little difficult, because you're in that twilight zone between not being big enough to have middle management, but also kind of like too big not to have it. I could keep on going. There is the period where you know everyone, you know their backgrounds, you
don't know everyone anymore.
I've tried to reinvent myself on that as we went on, because it means a lot to me. So I've just desperately tried to hang on to it.
You're 900 now, right?
Yeah, and
So
now I've completely, not giving up in that sense, because I have other formats now. But early on, I was very religious about meeting everyone and being a part of the hiring process and so on. And then as we grew to 100 or 200, I would still be a part of, if not the hiring process, I would at least have a meeting with everyone the first week. And then we became 300 and 400, and I would be like, I gotta be able to remember people's names. And I desperately try to hang on to that one. And I'm actually not very good at names in general, but when we had a team camp in Barcelona in 2021, and we had 200 people joining us that year, and we had this tradition that every time we brought the company together, which in the beginning was 4 times a year, then every 6 months, and then every year, and I think at this point in time it was a year ago. But every time we had brought the company together, there would be a ceremony where I would welcome all the new joiners that had their first, company-wide team camp. And so I had rehearsed, and I managed to welcome everyone by name, 200 people, as they were presented one by one on the stage. And then after that, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. It's just it's impossible. Today, I have come to terms with the fact that I cannot have a one-to-one relationship with everyone, but I want people to at least know who I am. So I do some vlogs now as a format that I use, where every week or every 2 weeks I record a vlog and I talk a little bit about what's been going on this week, what's on my mind, or I bring in some teams or some individuals and celebrate them if they've done a good job, that kind of thing.
So now you have a layer that you talk to daily, and then you cannot talk to everyone anymore. But do you sometimes get some pop-ups from the lower ranks that wants to present something directly to you?
I'm not very hierarchical in that sense. So it's not that I speak only with my direct reports.
No, but you're probably protected, or I don't know. You cannot. There's no way you can talk to everyone. So
no.
You talk to middle management. But do you have the culture where someone completely in the lower entry level in the company has a great idea and they just come directly to you? Or
Yeah. So I do that from time to time. I try to organize it in a productive way. So, earlier this year, we wanted some input for our scaling journey, and I did different formats. So we did roundtables where I would meet with 12 people and we discussed it, and I had a number of one-on-ones as well, random. People just signed up just to get the pulse from all over the business. I really like that.
Because the ideas can come from anywhere in the company, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's jump into the next chapter of today. And it's also about the growth, but it's a little bit related to what we're already talking about, that when you have this growth, it's really difficult to keep a culture and a DNA in a company. Let's start with something light. What is the most surprising thing that you experienced when this growth happened, that happened in the culture? So maybe one day you realized there was something in the culture that actually it was not from the original team, but some new cultural thing that was implemented. And you have such an experience.
Yeah, I think we've been very fortunate, and a lot of it was just came by accident almost. We didn't think so much about it. We've not been really structured about culture for the first few years. We were just very mission driven. We just said, hey, we want to build something great for our customers, and we will hire people who are very mission driven as well, and have a high caliber for customers and are smart, but not necessarily the most experienced. Now, that came with you could say we couldn't just pick and choose, because in the beginning we didn't have a name, or we didn't have much success, we didn't have much money, so we wanted people that really wanted to go for the mission and had some high caliber of smartness. We had to compromise with a lot of things. We couldn't build a team in Copenhagen, for example. We couldn't even, and I never wanted that, but we couldn't just say, hey, we want to build a company with Danes. So we hired all types of people, some in Copenhagen and some remote. And there was a lot of diversity in that from many different perspectives. Yet, because we were so religious about people being mission driven and not wanting, we kind of like, we didn't want people on board that saw us as a job. That was a saying we had when we recruited. They had to see this as their primary thing in life for a period of time at least. And that sort of mission drivenness and passion and sort of willingness to go very, very far for the company and each other, that became such a strong foundation between us. And I tend to refer to it a little bit as in math, where, if you add up sort of fractions, it can be very complicated. But if you have a common denominator, it's actually super easy. And it's a little bit the same with diversity. I feel that if you have a common denominator in your culture, your mission, and what drives people, it really doesn't matter, which nationality or background or remote or in person or what neurodiversities or whatever we have. It doesn't really matter. It just adds up and it becomes a really strong culture, and that's how it all started, and that we've tried to scale, and that's been super difficult, and it's been super difficult because in the beginning it was so unspoken, and it was just culture, and it was just how we acted and showed up every day, and naively I thought, hey, this is super easy, like we can just scale this company to the moon with just culture, but we couldn't, particularly not when we started to scale and hire really fast. Then suddenly those that have really sort of internalized the culture, they were a minority, and suddenly we were operating 2 years, I think, where half of the company had less than 6-8 months tenure. And then that's where your culture is a little bit at risk, because it's just too fast for the culture to replicate naturally. And I think we lost a little bit of that during that time. And that's when we had to be much more structured and talk much more about our vision, what we are, our values, how we show up, celebrate it. Today, even put it in as a part of our performance criteria, our leadership promotion cycles, and so on. And still, I would say we haven't nailed it, but that's the approach you got to have.
So how do you put it in as a performance criteria that it's
Well, some people would only promote on impact. So what have you achieved, which is certainly a part of it. But we also promote on what's your approach when you achieve it. How are you acting? How are you showing up? How are you leading? How are you showing up in the teams?
Okay. And you also said that you do these videos, these vlogs. It's also a way for you to still give some communication that is authentic, or what's the thought behind it. And you could also write a weekly mail, or
Yeah, it is. I like the format just because I think it's authentic. But it's also quite easy actually.
Yeah.
And it's a little scrappy, but I know that if I set the bar too high, I just won't get it done. And I don't have a big setup around me, anything like that. I just do it myself. I just invite a few people in for a 10-minute chat. I just click record and then mix it up and ship it by the end of the week. But it is exactly what you're saying. It is an opportunity to celebrate on values, or link stuff to our vision. A team has delivered this or released this tiny bit, but it links to our vision in this way. So constantly just give some examples of how, I think particularly our silent heroes, I call them silent heroes, those people that are a little hidden in the business because maybe they're not directly customer facing, solve some sort of immediate or very exposed problems, but they kind of provide the oxygen in the room by ensuring that fraud is monitored or whatever. Bring some of those to the surface and celebrate it a bit. I think it's a good format for that.
It really sounds like being involved in this part of the business is important to you as a CEO. That's something you prioritize very highly. The culture building. Do you have any really, really fun memories from these many years, from these cultural experiences, from events? Do you have something that could be fun to share with us?
Yeah, and I also think it discloses another thing, and that is in the beginning, at least that's what I enjoyed a lot. I really felt like just a part of it, and I mean, maybe not everyone around me would feel it, but at least I felt that I was just one of the gang, and that means just celebrating and partying and all of these things, which was really fun. And I also think, quite honestly, a part of the glue, you could say, in the company. But there becomes a moment where you somehow can't do that anymore. And that I realized that along the way that there's a moment where you're, if you like it or not, you're the CEO, and you're not in control of the narrative around how you behave anymore, and that's why you got to be a little bit more careful how you show up. So I can give you an example in this tight little group with 1 million voters on GSA that is going to view this afterwards. But there was a moment in time where we had the company in Ireland, and I think we were like 200 people at the time. And there was a lot of stuff going on the stage, and we had someone hosting the stage, and then without any preparation, they invited my co-founder and I on stage, and we had to do some improv stuff. And I had been drinking maybe 2 glasses of wine, and so had my co-founder. And it's just how improv just works is you're really on the tiptoe of things, and you got to make people laugh, and I think the humor we used was honestly quite inappropriate, and we have a little bit of that Danish humor where we can take it to the limit, and I just realized afterwards that was not okay. Like, yes, it was probably okay if it was amongst the first 30 people, and people knew me and knew exactly what I meant by that, but we were 200, and there were people that met me for the first time, coming in from China and other places working for Pleo, and I was like, I was a little shell shocked. Like, okay, this is the moment where I can't do that anymore, and I just completely flipped it around, say I'm going to apologize on Monday, and then from now on, I need to act in a different way.
I'm just visualizing that that moment. And did you realize it just after you went on off stage, or when did you
right after
realize it?
Right after I went.
You looked at each other.
So like people thought it was hilarious, but I just realized, okay, there might be 5 people who don't think this is fun, and that's not okay. So that's now I have this rule that when we have events, or particularly company-wide events, which doesn't happen so often anymore, but the evening unfolds in the following way. As the evening matures, some people would come and just say hi if I haven't met them before. Completely okay. Then the next step is people want to have photos. So that's actually also okay. And then the next step is people want to tell you something. And when that becomes a little, you just feel that they wouldn't have done that earlier in the evening. That's when I go to bed. That's when 2 people have said something that is a little on the limit of what I want to hear. I go to bed. That's how it is today.
But being a CEO and a co-founder of such a demanding project, then when you have to leave in these moments, then you kind of like another place to go and share these thoughts that you might have. Where do you go to then?
Yeah, I think that's a very real part of the journey. It sounds bizarre when you've grown a company to 900 people, and the number of interactions you have is growing on a day-by-day basis. But it actually feels quite lonely from time to time. And I would say even so, more and more as the journey matures. Not lonely in the sense that you cannot problem solve with your leadership team, or you cannot discuss certain things with your investors, or today my co-founder is no longer in Pleo, but still certain things I discuss with him. But still, it's at the end of the day, you're the only one, and people will leave and go, and that happens, and you're there for the long run.
Have you found ways to lighten that off your shoulders? Do you have time to do much else than Pleo and family? Do you have places you turn to, or hobbies?
Yeah, I mean, I discuss much of it as well with my wife, and each of it helps. But there is really no one, truly side by side that understands everything at the same depth as you do and see all the perspectives, right? So I think that probably one of the closest things is finding a couple of deep peer relationships with other founders. So I have a peer. I've actually never met him in person, which is a bit bizarre, but he's from Australia. But for the last 3 years, we've had a check-in every quarter, and we just completely open the books, you could say, for what's going on and how did that make you feel, and that sort of thing, and we are sort of at the same stage, which makes it easier. And have the same approach to things, and I would say a little bit the same belief in leadership and so on. That makes it easier.
I think that's a great advice, and I think all founders have that weight. Independent of the size of the company, it's just a different context. So I think it's an advice everyone maybe should take, and see if you can find someone, because you need someone to talk to that can relate to what you're going through. That's what you are.
And I would say probably the best is a co-founder. Some are lucky to have co-founders where they go like really tight partnership.
But then when you have the problem with the co-founder, you still need another place to go.
That is true. That is true.
And that can definitely happen also, right? You can see that many times. But we're already going a little bit down the rabbit hole, Jeppe, which I find really interesting. Some founders, even when they're very successful, they're not always that good at feeling proud of what they've done, or feeling like celebrating what happened. Can you share with us a moment, maybe recently, where you felt very proud, but maybe you didn't share it with anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I just came back from Lisbon last night, and I'm actually really proud of what we've built there. So it wasn't my idea, so I can't take a lot of credit. But we've built a talent hub in Lisbon with probably 150 awesome people, and they do mostly commercial stuff. But we have an entire building now in Lisbon, 5 floors, and I mean, it just felt so good to be there. And actually, a lot of them have relocated for this from all over Europe, and they come there. So it kind of feels like a little bit between, of course, a job, an education almost, because people have a really steep growth curve with a lot of coaching, but also like a little bit of a, what do you call that? Boarding school in some sense, where people have really taken a life choice to come to a place together, and they bond a lot, and there are so many friendships as well, and that's pretty clear as well, that I actually feel that, hey, I really hope that one day some of them will come and like tap my back and say, hey, this year or 2 or 3 years I had in Lisbon was amazing. I hope we can make that difference.
It sounds like that's something that adds that additional meaning also to what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that, had you asked me when we started the company, why start a company, or if you achieved great success, what would you look back at and appreciate the most? If you had asked me that 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to know it. I think I would have just said something around, hey, I just want to build a company and see that grow, and with that sort of experience and these sort of things. But today, it is actually not so much. It's not so much building a company. It's not so much building a valuable company. It's not so much. Yes, I enjoy, of course, and I find a lot of meaning in building great experiences for the customers. But when I really feel it in my body, it is when I've created great experiences for the people being part of Pleo.
I'm curious, when what you're describing sounds either as a transformation or realization. So what I've experienced talking to a lot of founders, and even from my own experience, is that you don't always know where your drive coming from, but you clearly know that there is something there that keeps you going. What you're referring to here is it that a transformation of something that drives you, or is it a realization of what actually is fueling you sometimes?
I think it's very interconnected, right? Because when I'm mentioning it is because it is really those moments where I can see that people are thriving, or have appreciated something, or potentially left the company and I've been really sad about it. But it's those moments where I can really see, okay, this matters for me a lot more than other things. It's not that it becomes a purpose in itself then. It's not that the greatest purpose of Pleo today is just to create great employee experiences. It's not, because that is interlinked. And I don't believe we can create great employee experiences unless we are successful as a company, unless we're incredibly successful with our customers. Because I can see what drives them, what grows them, what makes them proud, what puts them out of the comfort zone, and then they succeed and grow and celebrate. It is because of the mission of Pleo. So we have to put the mission of Pleo highest. And as we keep raising the bar, then that thing, that employee journey, that development and growth amongst people, that is a very real byproduct that then at the end of the day means a lot.
So it's all about the people at the end. This journey, you had to solve a lot of problems on that journey. Did you had any point in time where you say, okay, I'm ready to give up now? And of course you didn't, but you had some really specific moments where you're close to go another direction.
No, so I think that's another a little underrated thing is when, at least that's how it's worked on me. When we set up to start a company, actually, it didn't really matter so much what type of company it would become. We wanted that independence and that creation. But I could have been probably as excited about a bootstrapped company which hadn't seen the same sort of growth as fast as what we did with Pleo, which was a hyper-growth venture company. I think both are beautiful. What I think the second did was the minute we took in venture capital, which was very early, it completely forced us into not giving up and raising the bar, because those are the circumstances of venture capital.
So it pushes you to...
It pushes you. It brings an incredible amount of accountability, because you've taken other people's money, you've sold a vision, and I mean, then, well, at least I can't let that down. And then what happens a year later is you take other people's money and you sell a new vision, or let's say a bigger vision, and that keeps going, right?
And so the weight increases.
It's a one-way street, and let's see if it ever stops. But it's just, you got to be ready for that, because that's how it is. It is a one-way street.
Sounds like you express it in the way that venture capital approach helped you never to even consider giving up, because your responsibility was upweighing.
I mean, I could be forced to give up. But I could never consider giving up. I could consider what kind of role I want to play and these sort of things. It's not that it's just easy and given, but giving up is kind of like it's not an option. It's not an option. So when there was a moment where I think that was a little bit at risk, it was almost before we started. So there was a moment in time where so the way Pleo happened was not, hey, here's a very clear vision and this is what I want to build, and then I'll find some people. It was opposite. I wanted to find a couple of co-founders that I was excited about, and then I was kind of like, okay, we'll find a company to build together. And in the beginning, we were 3 co-founders, and after a couple of weeks or months, one of them jumped, and more like a life decision. And that made the founder team incomplete in some sense. He carried out an important role in the product and design and experience of the product. And I think that was a real moment where we were like, okay, this is game changing, and we were not responsible to anyone at the time.
The decision didn't seem that heavy at that point.
It was a heavy decision to quit.
So you could easily
we hadn't launched, we hadn't told anyone. There were really no one we were accountable for, and I think that was probably the closest. And let's assume my co-founder, he had been doubting or giving up. Then I don't know what would have happened.
Did you at that point also thought, I'm not sure? Or were you certain?
I was quite sure I would want to build a company, but if I hadn't succeeded finding a founder team, I don't know where I would have been.
We had a podcast earlier today where we talked a lot about randomness and luck. But of course, you have to, the more you do, the more luck, and the more randomness can give you opportunities. But I think it's a great example of that. And going left and right has really made a tremendous difference for you and everyone that is employed in Pleo. And so it's interesting how these choices can make such a big impact. I want to end it up with the last question. What part of your journey have you never shared publicly with anyone, but you might be ready to share to all these lovely people tonight?
Maybe it links a little bit to that loneliness a little bit. I think one of the hardest things have been, you could say, building really strong relationships in the company and then realizing that they all expire eventually. And
They are only as long as they are part of the team. You mean
they are, and it's I actually think it's a lot worse than when you're in a more professional corporate setting, because I at least feel that I use myself a lot more in the relationships. So most people, I sell them a dream and a vision, and I feel at the end of the day they make a life choice, and they often make some sacrifices to join and follow me and others, of course, but also me, and that makes it you're a lot more invested in the relationship, right? And then when people leave, and that can be either of their own choice or you ask them to leave, it's pretty tough.
Thank you for sharing that, Jeppe. And I think even me personally can relate to that, because when you build something, you give a lot of yourself into it, and the people you bring in, you are sharing something valuable with them, but they might not, and that's completely fine, feel the same way, because it can be hard for an employee and a great team member, a really amazing person, to feel that thing that you feel. And I think that's something a lot of founders might encounter from conversations that I had and from my own experience. And I think it's really great to hear that from someone like you, because to the outside world, you are a really big success. You are one of the few unicorn founders from Denmark, winner of Global Startup Awards. But I think it's really brave of you to share something like that.
And I think it's just to build a little bit on that. I think it's also really when you've hit it in the partnership for a period of time, where you really feel that, hey, things were incredible and they were working, and then there becomes an expiry, and sometimes that's just because the company has grown and that person is more of an entrepreneur and thriving in a smaller context, and sometimes it's you need fresh perspectives or whatever. But I think the fact that you've spent a number of years just really tight, and then you kind of like realize, okay,
nothing is forever, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but thank you so much for sharing. Not only that, but our whole conversation. I really find it inspiring and interesting. And thank you all for joining today. We're gonna make way more podcasts throughout the year, but of course we kickstart everything with Danish founders because we're from Denmark. And I think that's time to wrap it up, Jeppe. Thank you so much.
Questions. Thanks for listening.